When you're doing TV shows, all you have to do is just frantically tap at the computer and everything gets solved. That's generally how it works.
I know,
Um,
and you guys have such pretty graphics. I'm
I
always envious.
know.
Like, my job is when I should have all these amazing graphics, and we do occasionally create them, but they're only technically useful some of the time.
Well, the data visualization, right? And that's got to be fun stuff, isn't it? Now we live
Yeah, so
now.
It is
other
working
people
now. You
Okay.
are on YouTube as
oh,
well.
It's just
everywhere.
I think it's just a lag. There's something going on, and I'm not sure it's us. We'll see. Um, when in doubt, blame the internet. Anyways, well, so look, the stream will catch up, I'm sure. And audio's working very good. Facebook's okay here too. Hear you on Facebook. Great. Okay, good. I think we're gonna ride with it here. So our aerospace engineer whose job is to plan this stuff is being failed by my side of the stuff here. But anyways, so okay, maybe just let us know again what you do at NASA.
So I'm yes. So for everyone, yeah. So I work here at Kennedy Space Center in Florida for what's called the Launch Services Program. And so my job is I'm a flight design analyst, which means that I work with the trajectories of rockets. And so we're doing planning. We kind of liken it to like Google Maps. We're like, okay, what's the route the rocket's going to take? But then you start throwing all these requirements on top of it. And, ours are ones like, okay, are you pointing this, telescope aspect of the spacecraft at the sun? That's not good. And that's like, I'm going from Florida to New York, but I have to visit my cousins in North Carolina. So then I start adding, different stops. Or like, okay, there's this barbecue restaurant I really want to make sure I go to in Maryland or something like that. And
This
so
is
you
where it all
start
falls
adding
apart.
all
Yeah.
well, all of a sudden the trip starts to look a little different as you add these different parameters. So, but then we also have to make sure we plan for things like traffic or bad weather, because you never know when those are going to pop up. And so we have to have enough fuel and, stuff that we make it for, if it's a birthday party that evening, we have to make sure we have enough time with all those things that we get there on time.
It was the thing that it had never occurred to me because I thought, oh, trajectory. I guess, well, so it's like you do the math and you're done. Like what? Like that seems like what a great job. That's like what, a couple hours and then you go home. But I couldn't get over you can see the complication of just getting a stream up for me. But the number of different things to consider, which I'd never even thought of, like even from the very beginning of going like, well, what do you want to get up there? What do you want to put up? Like how do you even like so what's, if you wouldn't mind, just talk me through what is it. So what is the process here? Like what's the first thing that happens to get you involved in this stuff?
So we do stuff so if I start at the beginning of my job, so like if a mission first comes, then we'll do something called advanced mission planning. So then, and spacecraft who are going to be funded by NASA and will be coming through our program. So we do have a website anybody can use. So if you're curious about the performance we have on contract, anybody in the world can go see that with the Launch Services Program Performance website. And so if you're doing if they're going to a place that's commonly gone to, like I'm working on JPSS-4, so Joint Polar Satellite System. It's a storm one. So it's going to a sun sync orbit. So, imagine the Earth is rotating, and lots of times for weather satellites, it's useful to go over the poles.
Right.
And you do one where you're always seeing when you fly over the equator, you're always seeing it at the same time. Maybe it's like 2 a.m. When you go over the equator, first in the sun, or where the dark side is, and then 2 p.m. where the sun is. And so every time you're seeing the Earth in the same lighting conditions. And so that's a sun sync orbit. So it's going near the poles. And so that's a super common one. So like if they just have to kind of basically type in their mass, list that orbit, and say, okay, you can go on any of these ones.
Oh, wow.
And so we don't have to work with them very closely ahead of time before they get a rocket assigned, because it's like, this is a really standard one. But let's say they're an interplanetary one. And so you're going hyperbolic. So you're going to, going around the sun now, you're leaving the Earth's orbit. And if you're doing one where like you have a standard kind of inclination to it, then again, that's in the website, the database. They can kind of figure out themselves what rocket is. But sometimes, let's say they were going to a higher inclination one. And so all of a sudden we have to start taking into account something different. So then they start working with us and we start using the rocket models we have for the rockets we have available.
How do you do the rocket modeling? What sort of stuff? What sort of software and things are you using for that?
So we work with, so we only are working doing the modeling for U.S. rockets that are on contract with us. And
Right.
so,
Okay.
so they're going to be ones like, we have the Vulcan, we have Pegasus, we have Falcon 9 and Heavy. We've got Blue Origin, just their first one, and they're on our contract too, even though we haven't flown with them yet.
Right.
And same with Vulcan. So, but they involve working with the rocket companies. They are required as part of it. We get their information. And so we start modeling. Right. So we've used a couple different tools, such as POST and Otis, which were, developed by NASA. And so they're ones, but they're also, there's some availability depending software licenses. So other people can use them too. It's not
really?
only us, but it's also not free to it's not available to everybody in the world.
It's not, so it's not open source or anything. It's just, it's proprietary too.
No, it's very much not open source.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's, it can be shared, but under certain circumstances.
Right.
And I'm not the one who does that. So I don't actually, I can't
You
quote it.
really
I just can't
want people, just firing off their own rockets and I suppose this is
well, there's stuff where it depends on what it is. So then some things are made more available and stuff. But then there's also, we use things like software such as, Free Flyer and STK are ones, and those are the ones that are more graphical ones that our companies do. And so other people can buy licenses. There still might be rules about which who they can sell it to, but that's much more widely available. Like students at universities throughout the U.S. will use those.
Right.
There's tools. We have another one called GMAT, which is one NASA produces, and Copernicus, which also have graphics ones. So, but when I'm doing it, most of the time, I have no pretty graphics.
Right.
I'm just purely
the math, man.
It's just, it's like, it looks so boring. It's like this massive text document, but it's got things like it has the stuff where, okay, we can't go close to the coast. A big part of when we're planning trajectories is we have to keep the public safe and make sure there's an impingement. There's times when I've talked with spacecraft, they're like, well, you can fly up this way. I'm like, no, I cannot, not from that location. I have to be very, very careful to make sure that if something were to go wrong with the rocket, then where it would fall or pieces of it will fall, depending on what happens, that nobody is going to get hurt. No member of the public is. Right. So it's not going to fall on a city if something goes wrong. So that's one of the things that I type up in this long text code.
Well, and that's the thing that I find so just so daunting about it all is just the idea that there are so many different variables here. Is it something that, I mean, when you sit there and do this stuff, you say it's not sort of graphical, but do you see it in your head? Like, how do you manage all that data?
Yeah, you definitely have to be somebody who can do 3D and to a certain degree. 4D, although I won't really say, but really 3D imagery in your head. Right. Like if that was something that I'm sure there might be a way I could compensate, but it would be much harder. My job, if I couldn't visualize, okay, I'm starting at this launch site, we're going up, and a lot of people, they see the rocket and off the pad, it goes straight up. But actually, once it clears the pad, it tilts over. Right. And really what you want to do is your velocity, like when you're in orbit around the Earth, they're like, okay, we're going like 17,500 miles per hour. That's like how fast the space shuttle and the space station goes. Right. That is going, it's not going, that's usually going from west to east, right? Not north south, like not going up away from the Earth. Right. That's where your speed is. So like you get up and you clear the pad and then you immediately start tilting. You're still going up, but you're really starting to head directionally along the surface of the Earth.
And how long generally does it take you to get along? I mean, obviously you're saying that some of them are sort of more automated at this point than others, but for one of these, if you're going somewhere new and you're trying something completely different, the time frame on these things must be like decades. I mean, how do you? Yeah,
well, if you talk about the spacecraft, they are working decades ahead, sometimes decades ahead of time, but sometimes not. Like I'm trying to think of the Mars exploration rovers. That was a relatively short, which was Spirit and Opportunity, the ones the size of golf carts that launched in 2003.
I saw one of them at JPL actually, just before it.
Nice. Yes. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. That was when I was interning with the program my first summer. Those were my first launches that I got to see. I got to sit in the control room, put the headphones on and like listen And then because I wasn't really watching the launch, I got to like run outside and watch the launch. Because if you're actually working the launch, you don't get to do that.
I was so jealous of your day in a in the life of a NASA engineer because you started and ended with going and watching launches. Although the bugs, you did mention some bugs in that. The insects.
And that was the first time I ever did that. But now I've had that happen a couple more times.
Right. You're not up at 5:30 every morning, are you? That's not a.
No.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
No, not usually.
It was putting me off, this whole aerospace thing.
No, that was a choice.
Okay.
And I have to be willing to go. Luckily, not, because I have a lot of West Coast meetings. So
right.
for me, being on the East Coast, working a lot with people who are on the West Coast, I have to be ready to usually shift the other direction. If I worked on the East Coast or West Coast, I'd probably be a little bit more biased the other way.
Is it something would you like to sort of shift back and forth? Would you like to sort of spend some time on the West Coast and do some launches from there? And I mean, are there big differences to it? I mean,
so I'm not the great person to ask, because I've worked West Coast launches. My last 2 ones were West Coast, but my job when I'm on console, when I am working a launch, I am not critical. I'm not a critical person, because I'm not somebody that says go. Because my job as a trajectory analyst is to inform the chief engineer and the launch director, if they ask, where the rocket is.
Right.
And so, do you know where the rocket is before it launches?
No.
Sitting on the pad. It doesn't move.
Right.
So it's just there. And so they don't need me to tell them where it is.
Oh, I see. Right.
So before launch, I have no real job.
Right.
I'm just getting ready. So my job doesn't start.
I thought it was a trick question. I was like, what do you mean?
I know, it's kind of funny. It does sound like a trick question, but it's not. All the cameras, everybody knows exactly where the rocket is, because it's not moving. And so it's just sitting there.
That's your happy space right there. Yeah.
So I still have to get on and get ready, but I'm not really doing my job. Whereas other people are doing things like they're making sure that, all right, where's the propellants at? And they start doing that, 10 or, hours. So you have shifts of people, because stuff is not, you can't have people getting tired. You have to work with teams. Engineering is a team sport. And when you're doing space missions, it's really a team sport. I am just a cog in a massive machine of people. And so, so other people are like, okay, where are the fluid levels at? Let's move our fins to make sure, any actuators, anything that controls the direction of where the rocket is. You have to do tests on those, make sure that they're happening. And just everything is the electrical system, all the sensor data is coming through, all these things. There are a lot of people on console that are checking to make sure all that's coming through and looks good. And if something is outside of the normal parameters, then we'll go to an anomaly net, and
it's called an anomaly net.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's the name of a band. That's fantastic. An anomaly net. Okay, great.
So they'll do that, and for us, when we do ours, we are purchasing a launch service from a company. So we're buying from SpaceX, United Launch Alliance, Northrop Grumman, Blue Origin. Their new, I might have called Blue Origin a rocket. It's actually the New Glenser rocket. They are all they're the ones launching the rocket. Right. They are operating their system. We're like buying a taxi ride. You don't ever drive a taxi when you're in a taxi.
Right. Hopefully not.
But, yeah. And usually, like, lots of times, we with sometimes the spacecraft, they're only in charge of saying whether or not, okay, the spacecraft's ready to go, and they'll give goes for the spacecraft. But for us, when we buy our service, it's in our contract that we actually get to say, okay, no, we're looking at the rocket data. And if we don't think the rocket data says that the rocket's ready to go, our launch director will say no go, and they're not allowed to contractually launch the rocket.
Right.
Now, granted, we are working together, so it's not a usual thing. It's
not a power struggle. It's just a.
We are very much part.
Right. No.
We work together. There's only so many rocket companies in the U.S. That operate these kind of rockets that we can utilize that take us to orbit for our missions. And so it's very much a long-term partnership. And so we are constantly working together, and we definitely don't always agree, but we have a goal of getting successfully to launch. We need to make sure that, from the government point of view, we need to make sure these companies are staying healthy and can do their work. But we also are protecting our spacecraft, making sure that they're getting to space and they're not broken, that they're up there and they can do their job.
Well, yeah, and of course, if anything goes wrong, you're slowing down progress. I mean, you want things have to work. So, and it's got to be in a safe way. It's got to be an extraordinary feeling, though, because you are literally working with the like they're like icons. They're like, I mean, these rockets are, I mean, we see them on YouTube all the time with all the different launches and such. I mean, it's got to be, do you ever get that sort of like, oh my God, like I'm here.
Yes, which is really useful because yeah, I like my job, but it's like any other job. There's things that are frustrating and stuff, but then there's times where like, well, I'm trying to launch this spacecraft so that it lands on Mars and then take soil, which is like just it's fascinating. The first time we're ever bringing something back, so that another rocket.
I'm so excited about that. Especially since the Bennu, if I'm saying that right, that sample came back and they found those elements, the elements of life in there, not elements of life.
Yeah, different. I think amino acids. Yeah, so things which has been theorized for a long time, but now we're starting to get more data and stuff from that. So there's. I love my robots that we launch because I primarily just I do. They get to go to such cool places that we're not yet capable of sending humans.
And they look so lonely out there, don't they? They always have that sort of forlorn Wally look to them,
People are so sad when I tell them that we don't bring them home most of the time.
What, people think you're bringing them back?
Yes, that's a common reaction. Like when I talk about the rovers, and even like there was something I was showing my sister, and she thought it was something that we brought back from Mars. I'm like, no, this is something going to Mars. We only, even this thing that we're going to bring back is just a sphere. Like we're launching a huge, massive platform that's, I'm in a like way bigger than the room I'm in, probably two times the size of the room I'm in. And it launches, and it's got a rocket on it, but it's only bringing back a sphere that's like this big, like a soccer ball or something. And that's a huge thing for us. That's massive, technically, to be able to do that. We're still working on it. It's still quite hard and still figuring out exactly what the process is going to be like.
What's the round trip on that? Like, what is the round trip for to get something up there and send it back?
I want to, let's see. It's this one, and some of it has to do with how the orientation of Mars and Earth are.
Yeah, because it's got that weird offset, isn't it? It's got that.
And Mars year is approximately 2 years, and so, and if you saw one of the videos, like we always liken it to a quarterback in playing American football. Yeah, throwing the football to a receiver, and so they don't throw to where the receiver is at the moment they throw it. They go where they're going to be. And so because we have to wait for the Earth and the Mars to line up, it is such that you really want to wait until that happens, and that's about every 2 years. So that's why you'll notice that Mars launches are kind of like clustered together from multiple countries. What's
the window on that? Like, so when it's that close, how many launches could you technically get launched in that?
Usually we try and aim for like a 20-day period is what we call them, launch periods. And but it really varies based on how heavy your spacecraft and how big the rocket is. But not just that, like actually a huge amount of the factors are, you can't land during dust storm season. So sometimes, even though we launch in that time, it actually is going to take a couple years to get to Mars because they want to time it. So that it's not arriving when the dust storm season is just starting, which because then
I didn't even know there was a dust season.
They have. So we have people who are like weather people for Mars.
Right.
That's the thing.
Do they stand in front of those maps and do they do this? Do they do all that?
I'll have to see next time. I work with other.
They should really consider that.
That would be a great image.
Yeah.
But it's like trying to predict, when's the hurricane going to hit Florida next?
Right.
And so we know we know when the season is, and we know when it's likely. But actually, can you tell me even if a hurricane of like category 2 or above is going to hit Florida at all this season?
Yeah.
Not really. And so they can't say exactly what day it's going to start and what day it's going to end and how intense it's going to be. So that's a factor. We also can't, I kind of liken it to an egg toss. You can't throw the spacecraft so hard at Mars that it bursts upon hitting the planet.
Right. Yeah, we made it, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to be able to have conditions so you could slow down. And there's not a ton of atmosphere around Mars. Right. And so, you have to, there's a couple different methods that you use. It involves rockets, but there's limited amounts that it limits what you can do.
This is why you have that complex system of parachutes and then rockets and then cables and stuff to get, which I thought, I got to say, is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. Like I just couldn't. I watched that and I was like, oh, we are we've got this. Like, this is extraordinary how that worked out.
Yeah, people who design that kind of stuff are amazing at the Jet Propulsion Lab and other locations. So it's amazing how their brains work. I'm not a design engineer, so that's not something I specialize in, but
Right.
I can appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. You get to, yeah. I mean, and the amount of, how many changes do you have to make to these things? Like, how often are they like, okay, you know what? Look, we got a storm. We got to come in 2 years time or whatever. Are there a lot of changes?
No, we look at it and you're looking at percentages and stuff. And so you also are considering what satellites, like, you don't want to land when the sun is between Earth and Mars, because then you're not going to have good communications.
Oh, of
like,
course.
Like if you're working on the robots for Mars, you're probably planning vacations during those times.
Yeah,
there's a couple of weeks where you have patchy communication. So there's so many different factors. And so the people at JPL, when they're doing these, and those are the ones who I've worked on. So they're not the only ones that do this, but they're just the ones I've worked with the most on this. They have these basically, it's just, they try and, graphically show in spreadsheets all these different things they're considering. And it's something where, other people are like, oh, we can easily launch this time. It's like, no, have you considered this? Do you know exactly how the spacecraft is designed and what its capabilities are? Because that's what dictates what values are acceptable and, what the risks are. And so they do all that work. And then they turn to me and say, these are the dates we want to launch. This is C3 is basically how much energy they use. And then we use something called declination of the launch asymptote. And so that's kind of like, if you're throwing a ball, like a baseball, like pitching, like, if you're playing like a slow pitch where you're doing huge different angles. And so there's different ones. And then we'll do another one, RLA. And that's basically like, are you pointing, which direction are you pointing? Are you pointing towards the end zone you're trying to score at, or hopefully not the end zone that the other team's scoring at?
Right.
So that one's actually the easiest, because you just have to wait for the Earth to rotate to the right angle. So like that one's super easy. Like we don't even consider it until the end. And that just tells us whether we're launching in the middle of the night or in the daytime.
Wow. Do you have a favorite part of the job? Is there something is it sitting on the control board?
So definitely it's most exciting when you're sitting on console.
Console, right?
Yeah. And that is, it's like you've prepared for like this big test and like, all right, my work is pretty much done and I'm just observing. And so I'm just ready to tell them and make sure I have the tools so I can really quickly tell them whether we got it right.
Right.
But it is, I kind of liken it to, and have you gone skydiving before?
No, because I don't just play a coward on television.
Okay. I'm trying to think, I guess, what like a riskier thing. But anyways, for me, I liken it to, I've only done tandem skydiving.
Right.
I like
only. You had me. I mean, yeah, skydiving, you had me. Whether it's tandem or not, you're still leaping out of a perfectly good plane.
Yes. And but it's an experience. And so like the first time you do it, I was more nervous. And I'm like, okay, I've never experienced this before. I don't know how it's going to go. And so I did it. And then I continue doing it. And there's still always risk.
Right.
I know things can always go wrong every time. But I've been through it before. Yes. And so the nerves in my stomach are not quite the same level as they were the first time I did it.
It's the unknown.
Of course, yeah. And so it's a certain amount, but and so new things can happen. And so like I had ones and just different, the ground winds one of the days when I was doing it the first time I myself were not expected. So I had to answer questions that were different than I'd watched other people answer questions about because it was unique to the day that I was launching.
Right.
So it's just always a little different. I like working with other people. That's a big part of it, where we're trying to solve a technical problem, and it's trying to figure out how to communicate things so that we can like get on the same page quickly. We can get everybody to agree to what the answer is. And so I actually find like the combination of figuring out the technical work and what are good technical solutions, along with how to communicate with them and make sure that there's not any misunderstandings.
Right.
Because those happen.
Are you working with people like on a daily basis? Are you sitting down and working on this stuff together, or are you working on sitting down at your own desk and doing your own thing and then getting together? Or what?
It's kind of a combination of both. So if I'm either developing a trajectory myself where I've gotten the parameters, that's a lot of upfront work to and hopefully I like having conversations. Those definitely work better for me than only email.
Right. Oh yeah.
I'll always document everything, but I like to actually sit down and talk it through. It's hard. Not everybody has that style.
Oh, really? Some
And then
people
I'll
are just
go off.
like, no, just they want to just email and that's
Yeah, that exists. And so you have to compromise.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm like, so, you also want to, figure it out. So then I'll go off and work on stuff. And if I'm having trouble with the model, I'll go talk to my coworkers. I'm either in the office or like message on Teams, or else be like, hey, can we do a call, and talk about it, my issues. And then I'll come and present the results if I'm creating my own one, and do a peer review where we'll go through it and we'll look at different parameters. Like we'll look at altitude, we'll look at the angles, the alphas that it's flying, and say, okay, what does this look like? I'll usually compare it to a previous flight that is not the same, but has similarities.
Right.
If we can, hopefully that's useful for us. And we'll talk it through and then talk about what I'm going to deliver to the spacecraft customer is usually who I'd be delivering to.
Right.
And that's usually for advanced mission work. And then if I'm doing, if I've gotten, like right now I'm working on an analysis from a trajectory that I received from the launch vehicle people. And so I'm doing my different checks. And so that stuff I am sitting down and mostly doing myself, although I'll be like, hey, you've done this similar thing. Like if I haven't done it before, I'll be like, what are your codes? We totally believe in borrowing stuff to save time.
You're allowed to look over the other desk. Is there that
very much looking over each other's shoulders? I mean, like, how have you done this before? Let's not reinvent the wheel. We've got a good way to do it. But then sometimes I'm like, well, I don't like that style of check, so I'm going to do it my own way. There's still a little kludging around.
Is there programming involved? I mean, are you doing is it more the math than the?
No, it's more, it is definitely like programming. It's what I call pseudo coding.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm working with codes that are like, so I'm not a true programmer, like computer scientist, and I can read that stuff, but like, I definitely am, that's not my background.
Right.
So it's more pseudo coding for both when I use Post and Otis and when I use, tools like MATLAB. A lot of people use Python.
Oh,
There's
I
different
love
tools.
Python. I've got to say, I'm in love with Python. I'm amazed at what you can do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have I haven't gotten into it, but I have a lot of coworkers that have and stuff. And we're definitely encouraging our newer employees to like, all right, a lot of us older folks are using MATLAB, but you guys should be,
well,
considering looking at Python.
There's MATLAB packages, I guess, for Python now as well, so you can sort of integrate them, which is kind of neat.
Yes, I believe that is the case, but I haven't gotten into that space. So those things I do, but like when we're developing requirements, that's a lot of conversation, and not just with other trajectory people, but as somebody who works in trajectories, a lot of what I do affects a whole other bunch of disciplines.
Yeah, right.
So I'm constantly talking to the thermal guys because we want to know, okay, this is what we're planning for the trajectory. Like, can the spacecraft handle that? Or, as I said, some of them have optics, and so they'll have keypad zones because they can't have the sunlight hitting their that instrument, because it's just like your eyes, it's sensitive and can be damaged. We'll talk to the electromagnetic interference people who are making sure, okay, what's the telemetry coverage? So how are we going to be getting, as if the rocket's burning its engines, we want to have data.
Right.
We want to know what's going on with it.
So sensors everywhere.
There's a lot of sensors, but not as, it's way more now than it used to be, even a decade or two ago when I first started. We're starting to increase them. But also you have to think about like, okay, what is the usefulness of the sensor? What is it bringing? What am I going to make choices based on what information I get from it?
Because it's all weight, I guess, too, isn't it?
It's weight. It's also just data processing and other things, if you have it, like, how are you going to use it, or how is it going to help you if something goes wrong, to figure out what went wrong, and to make sure you understand it, which ones are critical for flight, and stuff such that if you're not getting data from it, you're not going to launch. You just have to like take a lot of those things into account. But we've done work, and I actually have some coworkers that have worked on projects, so we can better understand that. So like we can better know, like a big thing is when you're in space, and I actually did my master's thesis having to do with it, like fluid sloshes around in space different than it does on Earth. Like, I don't know if any of the videos I sent to you saw something that was filled with green fluid that was kind of moving around.
Yeah.
So that's something I didn't do that work. My coworkers did it, but my master's thesis was kind of the catalyst for that.
Right.
But so fluid, it can move in all these different ways. So knowing where fluid is in a tank and how much of it is a very big problem for space.
Well, especially if you're trying to launch a rocket as well. I mean,
and you want to try and as much as possible to know how much of it is, how much exists, and also how much can be down by the bottom of the tank that's going into the engine nozzle, so that you can use it. Because if it exists but you can't get it to where the engine is, it's not useful. We actually call something like talk about whether it's usable propellant, or,
Right.
because if it's trapped in a line, that's not usable. And if it's such a quantity that it's not able to get down by the engine, that's not usable.
Wow.
And so these are some of the problems we have to think about as we work together. So
I don't know how
there's
you
just a
ever
bunch of
sleep. I would be like, there's so many variables here. It's like, it's extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, that's where things to do on the off seat, I was, when I do things like I go rowing or hiking, those are great times to you get very focused on what you're doing, or else people spend time with their families and stuff.
Right.
And so you go and you have to you shift your focus.
Yeah. And I guess that's
But that
important.
doesn't,
Yeah. Do you get
there are
those?
times I don't sleep.
Do you get those epiphanies where you're sort of like you're working on a problem, and then you go and have a hike, and you suddenly go, "Oh, wait a second." Any of those, or you're good at keeping it separate?
No, I know those happen. Like I purposely don't. So hiking, I don't as much have a technical one. I'll think about more life stuff.
Right.
But I don't listen to podcasts or music when I hike. I have ruled it. Like if I'm out in nature, I am out in nature, and that's what I'm doing. Which I'm excited. I'm going to Arizona this weekend, so I'm
nice. Are you gearing up for?
But when I'm driving home, that's when a lot of stuff, like if I've decided, sometimes I'm listening to music or the news, and all of a sudden thoughts connect. But also sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm just processing a lot of stuff. We're just going to listen,
right,
to nothing and just look at this, luckily it's usually lovely. I drive over a river every day. And so, and sometimes the sunsets are really gorgeous here. And so sometimes I'll be doing that. And sometimes nothing occurs to me. I'm just enjoying zoning out while still properly, safely driving. And then sometimes I'm just thoughts are buzzing around and they're connecting.
I got this wonderful sense from you, from the interviews and stuff that you kindly share with me. There's a wonderful balance with you between your work and your world. Like you seem to both enjoy the environment as well as the rockets taking off at the same time. It's kind of a neat sort of duality to it, Before we get to questions, because I'm gonna be selfish and steal you for a little bit more time. I'd love to just talk about how you got started. I'm sort of obsessed with the idea of how do we, I feel like we've got the collective knowledge of the human race available to kids. All we have to do is get them excited enough to go looking for it. So what was it that triggered it for you? Even though I know the answer, I'm setting you up for that.
So yeah, we'll go back to, so now Caley no longer works for NASA.
Right.
She's
this
6
is
years
pre-NASA. NASA. Yeah.
So, so there were two big influences in my life. So one is is one where field trips are so important to take your kids places. Yeah. My family, I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and my cousins lived in North Carolina. Mm. And so when I was around 6, they decided, I don't remember who was going which direction. Mm. I feel like they might have been coming to us because we're closer to it. But Huntsville, Alabama, there's another NASA center.
Oh, wow.
And so we went and visited. And so, so I have pictures of me in the rocket garden, and I very distinctly remember seeing this neutral buoyancy tank. And they used to, at the time, actually have astronauts do practice, because the closest that astronauts have to how they move in microgravity is being in water, being submerged in water. And so we have a huge one I've gotten to see now at Johnson Space Center in Texas, and so that was a really awesome day. As people are trying to practice how they're putting things together on the space station, or just many other maneuvers. And so that really clicked with me, because I had a swimming pool. My favorite thing in the world to do at age 6, I mean, really all of elementary school, was swim.
Right. I love
and I was a swimmer in high school. And we were talking about I was so happy to go swimming in the North Sea when Agne and I were in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed that. So that was a big thing. And then also the thing though that really I watched over and over again is there's a movie called Space Camp.
Oh, you watched it more than once. It wasn't just a one time.
Oh yes, my parents apparently rented it, because so the movie came out in 1986.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't remember if I watched it before or after this field trip.
Right.
But we rented that multiple times. I was just like, Mom, why didn't you buy that for me? And she's like, it cost $30 back then to buy a movie. It was so
used to be really, my dad, the first movie my dad bought was $100, and it came on 2 VHSs. It was Patton or something. I remember. Yeah.
So that's why they didn't buy it for me. But now that looking back, they're we should have bought it for you. We just didn't know that back then.
And what was it that got you about it? What was it that was what was in the film that you went I wanted, that's it?
I wanted to float around in space, and I wanted to look at the Earth from above.
Right.
And
Yeah.
one thing I went to an event where Leah Thompson, she stars as a 17-year-old in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Kate, I'm blanking on her
Kate
name.
Capshaw.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was the like already a NASA astronaut who was waiting to fly, and they were the two leads of the movie. And so it didn't even occur to me as a kid like that was maybe a big deal, was that these are women who are leading it. And so I just imagined being them and like getting to go to this camp and hanging out with all these other kids, and then oh my gosh, the space shuttle accidentally launches and I'm on it.
Yeah.
And so it was just so fun to imagine myself in that adventure and getting to go to space and do those things.
Oh, it's funny. I very recently met Leah Thompson, who's absolutely lovely, at a convention in Paris. But the other connection I have is the launch director in the space camp was Terry O'Quinn, and he played.
Oh, nice.
I played his son in a film years ago, and he's another lovely man, scary looking guy.
But yeah. I agree. Leah Thompson was absolutely lovely to meet with, and when I asked a question. We talked about Florida movies she'd filmed and she said that many women have come up to her like that's, even though it was a horrendous shoot, apparently it was very painful for them to pretend to be in microgravity.
Oh yeah.
And it lasted like 6 months. It was awful experience, but she's like, but so many people have come up to me and were so inspired by that.
Yeah, fake space is a nightmare. Space was not designed for gravity. It's not, all of that moving around is just, it's terrible stuff. But yeah.
No, yeah. Anne Hathaway talked about for Interstellar, I think she had to keep her head lifted 2 inches for hours while she was on her back. And I'm like, oh, that's just so ergonomically terrible.
Us actors, we can always find a way to make it seem like it's more difficult for us.
I will say, it's not like there's not ergonomic challenges for real in space. There's people who that's their job. I work with robots, but
right.
Humans are a joke. We're squishy people that are hard to keep alive. And so there's people, that's their whole job is to so I can impart, we call them G's. And so that's the acceleration that the rocket imparts, or whatever space vehicle they're on, imparts on them. And spacecraft have limits. That's one of the things I have to work with my coupled loads people to make sure that we're not breaking the spacecraft, but people have lower tolerances, or else we can only do certain things for short bursts of time before it starts to impede on us. And there's just so many different ways. And so, they have plenty of real difficulties in space too.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of those things that I've always been like, there's definitely a fascination with getting humans out there. But I've got to say the robots, I've always found the robots absolutely fascinating because they can go further. They're designed for this stuff. We're not, we have to, there's just and all the food and all that sloshing around, there you go. You know about the sloshing around. We should go to some questions because I've already taken up all of your time here. I'm going to, without messing up what I've got set up. Let's see. Okay. All right. I'm not touching anything. Let's see what Agne's got for us. Okay. Or maybe there aren't questions yet. Okay. Maybe not. Wait a sec. Let's see. Oh, nope, there you go. As soon as I said it, they popped up. Okay. All right. So Raj Luthra asks, what do you enjoy and not enjoy about being an aerospace engineer?
So what do I enjoy? I mean, yeah, as I said, we'll always joke, and people say this in so many different fields. I really enjoy the people I work with. And part of the reason that I enjoy working with the people is not just the ones, their own personalities and them as the people that I value, but also we're very passionate about what we do.
Right.
It's a highly educated workforce. And so I can also, and they are passionate about the work that we're doing, the same as I am, or not exactly the same. We all have our different flavors. And so we're doing that for that reason, but also we have lots of different interests too. And so I can have when we have our lunchtime conversations, we can cover whole different fields and stuff. I really love working in a cooperative environment. And so where there is the goal, definitely my program, the goal is to get us, when we're trying to figure out a contract, what's the best value for the government? What is the right thing to do for the spacecraft? But then we're also trying to think, okay, spacecraft, we're going to have to explain to you why the rocket can't do that, or why, it gains you this tiny little of benefit, but it's a huge effort on the rocket. And we're not going to do that to them because they're our partner. We have to work with them on many other things. We understand the challenges they're going through. So I love working with that. It is very challenging though, if I'm working on a model and I've gone and I'm like, okay, this should work. I know it should work, and it's not, or else if it's something maybe that I'm doing new, when you're down in that thing where you're stuck, that can be really hard, especially if there's a time pressure thing. But then you do get it's like getting a renter's high or something where you get the like when it does work out, that is an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it's that I'm an idiot, I'm a genius. Yeah, it's that wonderful. Yeah.
Usually it's like, oh, I've been an idiot for 2 hours, but I figured it out now.
Yeah. You need the lows for the highs, I'm sure.
Or I've been an idiot for a week or two.
Right.
Right. That happens too. So yeah, it's there's things that go all back and forth. But yeah, the missions that I get to work with, I love the spacecraft missions. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even the one working on the spacecraft, but they, I kind of liken it to we're like the high school that all the spacecraft had to graduate through, because we call ourselves Earth's bridge to space, because they cannot do their jobs without getting in a rocket.
Yeah.
And so we're like, we're not their parents in the same way that people that build the spacecraft are. They love it in a very different way. They know them really intimately. They're with them their entire lives. We're high school, like, all right, you have to come through. Here are our rules. Here's what we're going to get through. But then you tailor things to that specific spacecraft and stuff. And then they separate from the rocket and we say, good job. Congratulations on your graduation. Send us postcards. Tell us what you're up to. But we don't follow them. We don't work with them beyond that.
So inspired by Space Camp, you became Space High School.
Yes.
Or Rocket High School, maybe. I don't. Okay, well, thank you for that. And good question, Raj. All right, Caley Burke says, what sort of research are you involved in or involved with at the moment? What's coming up? Good question. What's coming up?
So I can talk. So I am not a researcher. I'll be very clear on that, because I did get my master's and I was very happy I didn't want a PhD, because that's not I really live in operations. So as far as the spacecraft I'm working on, so looking at those as the research, I'm working on, so I had already launched, I mentioned JPSS-2, one of the weather satellites. And so it's super important for storms. And so I'm working on the fourth JPSS-4, which is the third one that we've launched. Sometimes numbers don't always line up.
Right.
And what I really love about that one, when I was launching JPSS-2, so as I said, I'm not essential. So I was, at the time, I just come back. I did a road trip for a year around the US during the pandemic.
Oh,
and so
did
I
you
was
really?
saying
Oh, good for you. That's great.
Yeah. So
just a camper
luckily,
or something, or what did you do? How did you do it?
No, I stayed in hotel. I didn't live out of my car.
Okay,
my car looked like it, but I only camped 11 nights of the whole year.
Oh, wow.
I stayed with friends and family or hotels.
Oh, great.
I boarded at people's houses when I took care of their pets. But anyway, so I was at my friend's house where I was renting a room after I came back, and it was really nice to be around people a lot after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I'm in my pajamas in the middle of the night working a launch, because there was a hurricane hitting Florida at that time. And so I normally would go onto the Space Center and go and be on console there and be all official, have my screens. But because of pandemic stuff, we'd been better with our systems. And so those of us, again, if I was critical, I would have been in California where the rocket was. Right, but instead I was in Florida. And I was in Florida, but I wasn't allowed to go on the Space Center because of the hurricane. And so so a hurricane and the brute of the force was around the same time as launch time. And we were getting data from JPSS-1. It has a different name once it's launched, that was showing us what was going on with the hurricane and had helped predict it as we were trying to launch JPSS-2.
Wow. Oh, that's cool. Did you put on special space pajamas? Do you have NASA pajamas or something? Is that...
I didn't. I mean, I was most of the time ahead of time was focused more on getting ready for the hurricane. And so, brain power did not really focus on.
What are good pajamas for hurricanes and launches? Let's see.
I mean, they totally exist. They exist. And I have dresses that are space themed, but I don't think I actually have a weather themed one.
Oh, there you go. Add it to the list,
Yeah. But again, how comfy is the dress? I definitely wear comfy pajamas.
Oh yeah, no pajamas. Look, if I had my way, I'd be wearing pajamas all the time. So and sometimes I just do. Okay. So next question. Two similar questions. Okay, so we both Jason and Raj are saying, I'm currently going to school for mechanical engineering right now. What would be the best practice to be able to work for NASA one day? Wow. And then someone.
The nice thing is. Oh yeah,
that's right. Along the same lines, Raj is saying, what does it take to become a NASA aerospace engineer? And is there an age restriction? Oh, that's a good question. Okay.
No. So the age restrictions. So we do occasionally have programs. So I guess one of the biggest ones, just because I know that you have a worldwide audience, is that to work for NASA, you do have to be a U.S. citizen. We do have contractors though,
Right.
who, and not all of them, but we do have quite a few where you can have a green card.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that is a restriction I just want to make people aware of. And it varies. But just because of the way things, I mean, if you're a federal government employee like I am, you do have to be a U.S. citizen. That's just
Right.
kind of the way
Right. Okay.
our government works.
Yeah.
Despite the that's not only because I work on rockets. Though, and we do occasionally have high schoolers who will actually take. So those programs kind of ebb and flow. But like I do have coworkers who started at age 16 or 17 working for NASA.
Well, you
which
were an
means they get a
intern
lot
as
of
well,
years.
weren't you? You were an intern as well.
I was an intern. I started at 20, so I was a little older.
Right.
So, and so, yeah, so I do always encourage people. So I'm an engineer, and about 60 to 70% of people who work for NASA are engineers or scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And that means 30 to 40 aren't.
Wow.
So we still have a ton of people. We're a huge organization. And so we definitely need lots of business people. We need accountants. We have people who, I travel for work, so I need people who act as travel agents. So love Heather, she set stuff up for me. We have, like, my friend Peyton does, graphic design and things like that, and working with Leejay and stuff. So there's all kinds of jobs. So I say, like, if you're passionate, there's a way to get here. Now, once you're in school, and so you do have to focus on your grades. We do unfortunately have some minimums for grades. So trying to keep above a 3.0 is just useful for almost any job. And, we have different opinions on those kinds of minimums. But getting involved in stuff. So for me, when I was younger, I was able to, I was a rower in college, and it was just a club sport. It wasn't varsity, because I'm always the worst athlete who doesn't quit. And so I did that. And so that, I still, even though I was not very good at it, or like not a top athlete, not a top rower, I was still somebody who showed up for practice, several hours of practice, 6 days a week. And I would go and spend weekends doing that. And so that showed dedication. I've been really heavily involved in my youth group in high school. And so I was a leader in that. And so I led, the weekend where I was doing leadership stuff. And so I could talk about those kinds of things. It is really useful, for us, because a lot of people are interested in doing trajectory analysis, and there's only so many jobs. Like, a lot of our interns have worked on projects, like where they're developing rockets or spacecraft, and they use some of those tools I talked about, like STK or Free Flyer or something else, where they've actually done trajectory design. So that's if you want to work with my specific group. But the nice thing is, like, lots of other parts of NASA, that's where, like, aerospace engineers are trying to get into. But, like, I have friends who, just put their resumes into the system of the co-op thing. And this is, again, 20 some years ago.
Right.
And, like, got a call from NASA and we're totally not expecting it.
Oh, wow.
So these days you do have to, like, more specifically apply, but you want to be able to have things you can talk about. We always say it's important if you're interviewing that you can talk about projects where there's, like, a STAR method where you talk about, like, what is it? What's the situation? What were the tasks you were given? What were the actions you took? And what was the result? So that's a really common one. It's definitely really true. Okay, you did this team. They did this cool thing. How did you make that cool thing part? What was it you specifically contributed to? And it's like, in interviews, you can't be humble. And it's so hard. I was recently doing some stuff where I was having to go through this process, and you have to, like, it's really difficult. You're like, no, we did this as a team. I love cooperation.
Right.
But you have to be able to say, okay, what did I specifically do that made this possible?
Right.
So,
that is a tough one, isn't it? You want to be humble, but at the same time, you've got
our leaders. To get to those leader positions, they're, like, not allowed to be, which, at least in those interviews, they can be the rest of the time.
I love hearing, though, that it's not just the marks, because of course you need to know, you have to have the schooling and stuff, but the idea that you can help by doing stuff in advance. I love all that, because that was, I mean, even just from the acting standpoint, that was my thing. We were making little movies as kids. I mean, and all that does is just, you're just better prepared for when you get that chance. That's fantastic. What about old people? What about me? What about, do they take in do I need any actors or anything needed?
Oh, I mean, you better off talking to Leejay about the public affairs side.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. There you go. Yeah.
Sometimes we definitely do trading videos, and I think that, we have other products we put out. It's the nice thing about working for NASA. But I mean, there's, people have different skills you can bring to. So still come to us with that. And there's other ways to get involved with NASA. Like, even if you're, not a U.S. citizen, there's things like we have the International Space Apps Challenge. So it's a weekend a year. We have a hackathon.
Yeah.
And so you can get involved with that. You can, figure out what your countries are. Like, even smaller countries will have space programs. And so, it's the scales are different, that there's no way around that, but there's things you could be working with that system, or else like, the science, like I love that. I mean, part of the reason that Agne and I met at the International Space University is that the spacecraft we launch are not all US spacecraft.
Right.
We work on ones where we've had Argentinian spacecraft, Japanese ones, and French ones and English ones where we've launched them on the US rockets. But we also will advise when we launch US rockets or instruments. Like we have like on NISAR, it's an upcoming one where it's an Indian spacecraft on an Indian rocket, and it's like $1 billion JPL payload going on that.
Wow.
And so there's people that I work with that have been involved with that have been tracking. It's not the same level in depth when we have our contracts. We can really get into the rockets, but we can still provide guidance to help out and make sure that things are progressing as expected for the rocket.
Does it feel busier? I mean, does it feel like I mean, to me, it feels like there's more going on than I've ever seen.
Yeah. So like for my job, we've had years we've launched 8 missions versus 1. And so our work feels constantly steady. But as far as the number of rockets, period, yes, that is more that we're seeing. There's a lot more commercial ones. It was hard going from like, I was somebody who, have you ever seen, there's a movie where in it, when the characters, it takes place in the future, and they're work in the logic business, and he's somebody who comes out at noon every day and watches the rockets launch, and not a lot of people do that. And like I've always related to that, because I would, if I was in Florida and I would try and set a timer and make sure that I went out and watched a rocket launch. And I don't do that anymore, because it's like I can't get up at 3 a.m. a couple days a week to watch a rocket launch. It's just so many are happening. So I still do try and like look and say, okay, this is the one that's coming. This is during daytime hours. Let me set a timer so I can step outside and watch it. But it's really frequent. And it does, if I try to make sure I watch them all, it will really seriously interfere with my life.
You'd lose your job, because they're frankly, you'd be too tired the entire time. But I guess just going back to the schooling stuff for a second, I guess. So even if you're not American, there are the key would be to still find those sort of side projects during school and stuff because I'm assuming the same kind of criteria would be for ESA or for any of the other,
Yes, to my knowledge, that's something that's useful around the world.
I think that's great advice. Great advice.
Yeah, because, and it's like, there's something where you don't want to be like, you won't want to be somebody who's on 20 projects that are successful, and then you're like, well, I was just there.
Right.
You want to be,
right.
Be able to say, and there's nothing wrong with being just a contributing member, to some of those. But then it is good if you can talk about how you led either an aspect of the project or a certain way, or a massive contributor. Because there's things where, like there's stuff where I took leadership roles at times, but then there's other stuff where like, nope, I'm somebody that shows up, and that's still important. Like, a leader without a group of people that they're leading, or leaders without a bunch of group that's, they're just the ones doing all the work then.
Right.
And you're not going to get as much done as when you have a larger group in general.
Yes. We can't all be the born leaders. Otherwise there's nothing. Someone's got to do the work.
Even if they are, just like, somebody needs to be the one who's taking point, and it should switch around. But, at the same time, like one thing I talk about with people that's also really important that I wish I'd taken more seriously in school was like looking out for your mental health. I really appreciated like, I had stuff where I gotten some issues in my family, so I joined a support group in middle school, and then I mentioned the youth group in high school, and those really helped enhance my emotional intelligence. But then as I kind of got towards the end of undergraduate school and was working, I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome. I didn't know what that was then. That continued when I went to grad school, where I was really struggling technically I was starting to struggle with the work technically. It was no longer where it was something where I was just grasping it with as long as I put in an appropriate amount of work. It was getting technically harder. And I just kind of felt overwhelmed, like I wasn't good enough. I didn't belong there, which is actually like super common thing around engineers and just all kinds of people that are in high performing fields. But even not like experience that all the time. And I really, now realize I'd had social anxiety when I was younger, and I kind of worked through that on my own. And then I got work anxiety started happening when I was around that time, as the end of my internship, as I started working. And, I've since I would work on things for a long time by myself, and I would apply myself, but then I actually sat down with a therapist and got more tools a while ago, and I've really worked through them and a lot. And it's not that it's gone, but it's much more manageable. And I still have always built up really good groups of friends. And as I said, I got that training when I was younger. And so those were massive supports that allowed me to function really well. But even, being willing to say, okay, I need more tools and I need to go work on this. That would have helped my career. My career might not have changed at all. I love where I'm at. I've purposely stayed where I'm at, not taking opportunities because I love what I'm doing so much. But options are a little different when you don't have anxiety.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's something we didn't used to speak about. I mean, so I'm older, obviously, but it's nice to see that it's something that people can actually, because if you don't talk about it, you're on your own. You're isolated on this stuff, and I'm so sort of like excited seeing my son growing up in the environment now and being able to speak to the mental side of stuff, because often it's just about you just plow march on, it's that's good. You got to look after the brain as well. I mean, it's just as complicated as the rockets, right?
Yeah. And there's things like, there's executive coaches, and like I was doing a leadership program where we got coaching, and then there's been ways where sometimes that's available too. And so there's things where like sometimes it's not even like necessarily where it's it's just somebody to help talk through different things and strategies and stuff can also that, so there's just variations in it, and it can make a difference.
I feel like I should have worn my leadership shirt. So I'll have to get you a McKay leadership shirt. That was one of my characters' big thing, was he really thought of himself as a leader. Not really a lot with the social skills. More questions. Raj, again, okay, can aerospace engineers become astronauts, and would you consider becoming an astronaut? Ooh.
Oh yeah, I would. If they let me fly in space, I would do that today.
Oh, in a second.
So yeah, I still apply. I enjoy getting the rejection letter. Yes. And so I have a friend who is currently, who went to one of my schools with me, and was a classmate, and was just a part of the most recent cadre of people that are applying. So, fingers crossed that my friend ends up getting through. But yes, lots of them are aerospace engineers. There's multiple ways to become an astronaut. I mean, aerospace engineer is one of the common ones. I mean, you can be a medical doctor. You can be a researcher. I have another friend who, she kind of got to the same level as my other friend. Wasn't selected, but she was doing biology, a researcher and stuff. But she'd also rowed across the Atlantic Ocean 1.5 times.
Oh, wow.
So,
there's a underachiever there.
Yeah. There's like a whole list of things, that are useful. And there's all kinds of Reddit groups and stuff that people that are interested in being an astronaut can do. So yeah, I would do it. But I've also chosen, when I was in college and learn more about NASA and things, I kind of chose, okay, I'm going to do my career based on what I want to do, not based on what I think will make me be an astronaut.
Right.
And so my job, it's not that I'm not a good candidate, but it's not one where it's one where I'm like an outstanding candidate.
Right. It's definitely changed too, because it was all sort of test pilots, wasn't it? It was all very sort of male and macho test pilots, and then they've sort of opened it up now to scientists, and it's definitely the astronauts have changed their, it changed a lot with the shuttle days, and then I can't speak as much to this because I don't follow as closely, but now we've got the art, and then it was the shuttle days, and then we were maintaining the space station, but now we're switching to the Artemis mission too.
And so that's gonna be yeah, it's exciting what's going on with that one. So those are, so there's different qualities, and I always look at it, and actually I do interviews of high school seniors who are looking to apply for a university, and kind of it's the same thing. They're looking for community, and so they're looking for a certain set of skills and how people gel together and stuff. And so sometimes it's like, it doesn't matter what you look like as an individual. They're looking to see, okay, at this moment in time, how would your skills gel with these other people we're building? And I've heard stories of, like, for competitive rowers, that they build the boat where they pick, a coxswain and the stroke. And the stroke is the person who sets the rhythm of the boat. And then they together pick the next person. And they go on until they pick. And so that's how some people have picked boats and stuff. And so that's where they're self-doing it. But it's kind of the same concept of building, where it's about how you come together. Because rowing, it doesn't matter how strong you are and how much you're pulling, it's how you are together pulling.
Yeah.
that really makes a difference and makes you fly across the water. And so there's a little bit of similarity there.
I've never actually done rowing, but I recently actually sort of pandemic stuff. I ended up getting a rowing machine, a nice sort of one of these C2 rower concept things. Yeah, it's hard work.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, I was amazed at how, it's just, there are places that hurt that I didn't even know existed. I mean, and are you still doing that a fair amount of rowing?
So I was doing it until the summer, and then I have an injury to my arms that I'm kind of waiting to heal before I pick it up
It is
again.
kind of repetitive, isn't it? You got to be careful on.
It is, and I don't know if rowing caused it or something else caused it, and rowing's just affected.
Oh yeah.
So
just wait for age to kick in. That's when it really becomes fun.
Oh no, that's already happened. I tried to do it a couple of years ago, and then I was like, oh wait, I went a little too hard one day, and my shoulder, it took a while for the shoulder thing to heal. So, I've not done anything bad. It's like we joke with my friends, like you play like soccer and basketball, like there's people who go a little too hard, and we're just like, dude, don't hurt us.
Yeah, that's it. I don't want to be hurt now. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's one of those. I always love. People are like, oh, it's so soothing and calming to watch people row on the river. I'm like, it's not what it's like on the boat.
Well, it's funny because again, it's actually a perfect example for the working as a team thing. Again, you can pull away all you want and be I've got to get, if you're not in sync with everyone else, it's
not going to get there.
That's actually probably a really good one for getting into some of these programs, I would think. Okay, what else we've got here? Do you have time for a couple of questions? Are you good for?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Jackie says, this always comes up now. Always. AI. Do you use AI in your work?
So I do not. We are still, there's different ways NASA is looking at AI and stuff. And among other things, we have to figure out if we're going to use it. We have to make sure we have the right IT security things in place, that we're using it where we're only using the appropriate things. And then we do it. We also have to figure out, well, what are the checks to make sure that it's right.
Right.
So we're, NASA is not using the AI, but definitely it's not something we're leaping into.
Are some of
at least observed.
Some of the robots, are they autonomous at all? There must be some amount.
So autonomous and AI are not really, and this is where I'm not the expert, but they're not the same thing. So being autonomous does not involve AI. Yes, there is definitely autonomy that is built into it, but that is basically telling it, okay, all right, you're doing these things and you're programmed to be able to handle this stuff on your own and do this, based on this actions. And if you encounter these kinds of things, you stop what you're doing.
Right.
And so that is a lot of
than.
Yeah, it's not saying, okay, here's all this data, go process it and figure out your best path forward based on conclusions you could draw yourself.
So it's more like a traditional program than some kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it can still be really complex and involve lots of different things that are more impressive, but. Yeah. To my knowledge, and this is where, again, this is not my field, I'm not aware of anything that is a spacecraft that has AI in it that's making decisions that are being executed.
I've definitely.
But again, I don't know.
We were talking about Python. One of the things I've used it for is to help me with Python. It's great. You walk me through what things are and it's almost like a tutor, just for it saves you going to try to find how do I do this? It's a syntax thing. It's fun for that. But
yeah, no, there's definitely ways that you can use it as a tool, and that's a good way that, like, I think where we're going to start is using it as a tool, but not the one that's doing the final thing. Yeah. And again, various people are doing it. We have different parameters where we're allowed to do it, and so yes, people are doing it, and I know some of my coworkers are doing it more than I am. But.
Yeah, you really don't want to be handing the reins over to something that you don't know exactly where it's getting its decisions from. So, yeah.
And again, we have I deal with a lot of data from companies that I'm not allowed to share with, so I can't put it on an AI server.
Yeah, explain.
That's among the big. Yeah, so there's things where I could do something general, like a coding thing, like, okay, remind me how to do this for this particular task that has nothing to do with rocket. That's totally acceptable for me to be able to do that. So going and getting coding prompts, as long as I'm keeping it generic. But go analyze this data, there are ways you could do that, but you have to have the systems be completely internal and really take that into account. So we take that very seriously, guarding the data for the companies that we work with.
I guess does that mean there's an AI department? Is there a section that's working on this specifically, or is it all just going to be each division working
It's
on
under,
it?
I believe, our chief technology or information. Oh, I'm blanking on what the name of it
All right,
is.
but
The people
there's
who deal with all our IT systems, they're
okay.
the ones who are working,
Okay.
who
All
are
right.
who give us those kinds of rules.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Systems, always systems. Okay, what else? This is my favorite question, Raj. Not my favorite question. One of my favorite questions. So, do you watch any sci-fi movies or TV? And what do you like to watch? Yeah, are you a
Okay.
sci-fi nerd at all?
So I'll talk. So this is me stepping into my personal life, not
Yes,
an
this is
employee.
not NASA. This is Caley. Yeah.
Yeah. So no. So I enjoy sci-fi. I'm not a huge sci-fi nerd, but I definitely it's a part of the fictional worlds that I consume.
Right.
So like but like my coworkers, like you walk around our cubicles and you will see various things, Legos and other stuff from various science fiction stuff all over.
Right.
I do have a TARDIS cookie jar that's in my cubicle.
I noticed
And
that.
So a police box full of stuff. So yeah, I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I got that from one of my coworkers when they were rebooting the series back in 2005. He was talking about it all the time, and so then I picked it up from him. I still need to catch up. I'm not current on it. I'm like a season behind or so.
There's a lot. There's an awful lot of Doctor Who. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then like Battlestar Galactica, my friends in grad school, there was a group of 4 of us that we watched like every episode together.
Oh my God, I love that show. We binged that show in an unhealthy manner. I mean, it was extraordinary. I'm curious to see it again now because it was just so of its time. I'd be curious to sort of see how it holds up, politically and stuff. It was beautiful.
I feel like I think I watched it a couple of years. It might have been during the pandemic. I started to restart like one of the seasons, and I felt like it was holding up. Like the stuff that I was like not as big a fan. Like it was, I had kind of the same issues as I did when I watched it, over a decade before.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, and then like Star Trek Lower Decks is one that I've started. So
Really?
I'm not a Trekkie. I've watched the movies and I've seen a couple episodes here and there, but I'm really not a Trekkie. But I still love Lower Decks.
Really? Oh, I'll have to check that out. I haven't seen.
It's a very, that there's jokes you're not getting, and
right.
so. Or there's some stuff, or else like they're on a planet and they're talking about stuff. And so that there's like this wealth of knowledge that you don't get. Mm-hmm. But like you can perfectly follow the storyline. The main jokes are all ones that you're getting.
Right.
And I just enjoy the group of characters they have. It's very fun.
Always the characters. Always comes down to the characters. Have you watched The Expanse at all? Have you done any? Seen any
yes. So I watched all of The Expanse. I really enjoyed that. Although it's funny, I'm somebody who doesn't always love the alien stuff. Basically,
right.
So like it took me a while to get into the proto-molecule. Like eventually I was like very cool with it. But like at first I'm like, no, I want the other parts.
Yeah, I find I go, yeah, politics. Go back to the spaceships. That's
yeah.
But the reason why I asked specifically about that one is because just so many of the sort of science-based people that I speak to, because it's just done such a wonderful job of building these worlds. It's one of my friends did the special effects the first couple of years, and lovely guy and a total space nerd too. He's going to be very jealous of me having this chat. In fact,
no, it is nice, and I really appreciate in that show. And then I read the first couple books of how long it takes them to get places.
Yes, that's like so funny. You're the second person to say that. Yeah.
They still have this like the amazing technical drive that they developed that allows them to get places and explains how they can do stuff, but it still takes time. And like that's reality is like, all right, we launch a spacecraft and then, it's there was one we launched New Horizons to Pluto and we're like, thank goodness we launched in the first 2 weeks. So it's only going to take 9 years because when we launched the second 2 weeks of the launch period, we would have missed slingshotting it around Jupiter and it would have taken us 15 years to get there.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson got its planet status taken away as soon as you launched.
People always love that. I do have a friend who just put out a paper about Pluto and its moon Charon and how they, the modeling she did is like it looks like when the moon hit Earth, like some big mass hit the Earth, the kind of a glob came out, but they were icy, and so she's like, we think that our modeling shows that they kissed. And then they were together for a few hours before they broke apart.
The romance of space, of planetary orbits. Okay, what else we got? We got. What about games? There's no way you're playing Kerbal Space Program.
So no, I don't
That's like working.
because
That's like going home and working.
it is like work. I do appreciate when I have conversations with people who play Kerbal because
Right.
they understand parts of my job better. And like I can talk
Oh.
about C3 and they know what it is. So like the conversations I can have with them are different than other people.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
I appreciate that. But I'm not like a video gamer. I enjoy board games a lot. But I like just, on my phone, I have like 2 or 3 games that I just play and it's more like a relaxation, repetitive.
What do you got on there?
Like Alto's Odyssey and Adventure. So it's just like it's like somebody who's snowboarding and it's just a Running Man game and they do no challenges. And I've played those. I think I've beat it like 8 times.
Oh, wow.
Like all 60 levels because I just keep going through it. It's just very relaxing.
There's that overachiever thing again. It's very relaxing, crushing these games.
No, so I'm not doing it. Like I actually am stuck on a level and I'm not like trying to beat it right now. I enjoy the act of playing it.
Right.
And so I don't.
And board games as well? You're saying board games is something else?
Yeah. So there's a variety. Like, I mean, I love Settlers of Catan. I started playing that.
The best. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Pandemic. My friends and I really got into that before the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you played? It's a cooperative, and there's Oh yeah. So I enjoy that. And like the Captain's Dead is another one of my friends had where they're cooperative games. And so you have different roles. And so, I mean, it's like work, in the sense of that you're doing different things and you have, different focuses and what you can achieve, but you're trying to all do it together to reach a goal.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's the one of the things I started doing with University of Toronto up here is escape puzzle learning for just to try to get kids more interested and also have them show what they've learned by building these puzzles. And it's it is just amazing because what I love about it is that the more diverse the group of people is, the more likely they are to solve or come up with these fantastic puzzles because it's everyone's different perspective on stuff that builds these things. And it's
I enjoy trivia nights. And it's definitely better when you have people from diverse generations is really helpful, but also my friend Dawson or Dave are great for sports and I'm good for history and literature and some pop culture stuff. Don't ever try and have me guess a song.
Don't ever try what was that?
I can't do the guess the song. Like if you play a melody, I can't get it. I'm just I know that song. Can't tell you what it is.
Yeah, that's basically all I can contribute to. I know that one. That's about it. Let's see if there's any more questions. Or Star Trek Online is another question asked about space engineers or. Yeah, I mean, actually, let me give a little side question to Raj's question there about video games because I know you're not really playing video games. Do you think any of these are useful for people? Like if you're a kid in university and you're interested, is this something that do you think there are elements to these that could be useful?
Yeah, no, there's definitely ones. I mean, there can be a lot of education in games. I mean, they're wonderful for storytelling. In so many different ways. There are military and other people's simulators can be useful. I think the thing with games is you're trying to achieve levels in a set way. And so I think that there is usefulness in it, but if that's all you're doing, you're not getting, I mean, some of them have a lot of freedom, but it's not the same as trying to solve a problem that's given set parameters. Okay, we have to produce this by the end of the semester or something. Right. So yeah, there's definitely good elements to the games, but it's hard. I'm not someone who plays them, and so I know that they're out there, but I don't know the details of it.
I only played with the kid, and then I've sort of stopped since because I just the problem with games for me is I just feel like there's so many amazing things to learn out there. I don't feel like I don't have as much time for the games. But as you say, the community aspect of things, I guess, is what I love watching my son play with all of his friends. Because I just love watching their dynamics and how they organize each other, and it's so different from that sort of stereotype of the the lone nerd at home playing by themselves. It's pretty neat.
Oh yeah, very community. Even when I was growing up, we would play, Dr. Mario and Tetris and other things. I remember loving when people Twitch came out and people were watching video games on Twitch. I'm like, yeah, no, as a 7-year-old, I love watching my friends play video games. Yeah, this is just another version of that. And so we played them, and it was always just kind of something we did for half an hour, and then we move on and run around outside and do something else. Right.
Yeah, we were never allowed to play. Yeah, we always got kicked out. It's true. You had to go outside for a lot of that stuff. Let me just double check with Agnes, see if there's any more questions or not. But you have been more than generous with your time and your troubleshooting. Thank you so much. Again, I apologize for the way this began, but my God, it's ended lovely. This is such a great, so much fun, and I thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything you wanna throw out there for people? Anything anything you want to?
Well, I would say nothing. Is that, something I always challenge people is to, people watch videos of rocket launches, but to go watch one live, even if you can't, watch it in person, but to go be like, okay, this is happening at this date. Let me go try and do it, because it is a different experience. Like, I watched a mission where unfortunately the rocket exploded, and the time dilation during that explosion was totally different than like experiencing it when I went and watched the video later. And so there's something about like the count, like being with the countdown, and even though if you're on person, like following along. So, and luckily they happen all times a day. So anybody, you can fit into your schedule.
Really?
We have one coming up called SphereX that's launching from California, and it's going to be studying stars and galaxies. And so that's one coming up. I think it's currently February 27th, I believe is the date.
Oh, great. Okay. What time? Is it some ungodly hour in the morning, or is it?
I think so. I believe it is early evening West Coast of Pacific time.
Oh, great. Okay.
So,
right.
So that one's much more reasonable.
Yeah. That's really good advice, because it occurs to me that I've only watched a couple of things sort of partially live, and it's usually I rewind to watch to catch up type thing. But it's true. The actual live aspect of it it does make a difference, doesn't it? It's fascinating.
And I will plug, if it's one for like either NASA or ESO, like a scientific one where they're trying to hype stuff up, you will probably find more content about the mission and stuff, and they might start a little earlier than if it's a commercial one. So that's kind of my plug for ours.
Are there things that people should be subscribing to for that kind of stuff? Is there? I'll put them in the links after. But there's.
I mean, you can follow just NASA on YouTube and many other social media places. Rocket companies, you can follow them, and they usually will have live streams of theirs.
Right. Okay.
So.
All right. Are there newsletters and stuff you subscribe? I mean, are there things that you?
Yeah, so NASA has one. Yeah, NASA has a newsletter, for sure. And so they put out, and I think they have a couple different kinds. So I do I joke, I first joined Twitter so I could figure out what NASA was doing, so that I could follow different accounts, because there's so much going on, I can't keep track of it.
Right.
And so, but then also I was really excited. I'd worked on the Curiosity rover launch, and so I was very excited for it. And I was like, maybe I don't have to tell all my friends on Facebook who aren't into space about this. I'll go tell community Twitter people, and they can get excited about it.
Right. That's great, because I'm sure people are going to want to keep doing this. And
then that's right. We have NASA app, and we just got I think NASA Plus is a new thing where that's a wonderful way to do it. So the NASA app is a good one, and then NASA Plus. So where you can get streaming from different NASA things. And we actually we streamed something, it was from Astronauts, and we put it on the big screens at work, and like the quality of video and how gorgeous it was when you had it up huge was just amazing.
Oh, fantastic.
Like I'm like, you should put these in movie theaters. They're just so lovely.
Leejay in his efficiency has given us both links, so we can I can post them in with the descriptions as well. Yeah.
So NASA is where you are, and we have NASA in Spanish. We're definitely trying to work on connecting to the world, meeting people where they're at.
And that means I guess you're meeting people from all over the world at the same time, right? Is that, are there people coming and going? I mean.
So as far as, you mean people that I work with, or people that like from social media? I guess I'm not.
Well, I guess both in a way. Do you get exposed to a lot of people outside of what you're doing, and because you're saying you're doing some teaching and stuff like that? Is there?
I mean, I do outreach, so I'll do things where, so I mean, occasionally I will do like a conversation with people. Like I remember one in like Italy, I did through, Skype aside an outreach program that's not related to NASA and stuff. So so I will talk with people. When I used to be involved with the International Space Apps Challenge, we were doing things where sometimes we connect with different embassies and stuff, and or work with challenges. So yeah, it happens. It just kind of ebbs and flows with what I'm currently up to.
Right. When you're not too busy, figuring out how to get the rockets exactly where people needed to go.
Right?
Caley,
it's a nice sport.
I don't want to exhaust you. Thank you so much for this. I cannot thank you enough, and thank you, Leejay, for making all this happen. Again, it's just an absolute pleasure, and I'd love to touch base with you again later after your next launch, perhaps, and get
that would be nice. And then the virtual guest program, that's right, I forgot about that. So if you're following a NASA launch, we have a way where you can specifically sign up for a launch and get information about that.
Oh, fantastic.
So
Okay.
you guys could become virtual guests for the Spherix one. It's something we developed during the pandemic because we have ones where if you're U.S. citizens, you can apply and come do a NASA. Oh, I'm blanking on what it's called. A NASA social. That's what it is.
Okay.
And so you can come and sometimes get special access, but we have virtual ways for anybody to do that around the world.
Right. That's fantastic. That's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, I would say, was the fact that there are so many more opportunities to be a part of things in a remote sense as well, which is, although I do prefer, as you say, it's just nice having human contact.
And I will say, if you come to Florida, a rocket launch is way better in person.
Oh,
yeah.
I can't wait now. I'm like, in a weird way, my interest in space was always the computers. I don't know why, but it was always, to me, it was always and the robots and all that kind of stuff. The rockets, I was like, yeah, cool. But I'm definitely, the more I learn, the more I realize how, what I've been missing out on. So I can't wait. Yeah. I have to do that.
You got to go through us to get to space. So
exactly. That's it. You got to go through us. I love it. Thanks again, Caley. I will say to everyone and everyone in the chat, thank you so much. Agne, again, thank you for making this happen. I'm so glad you met on your space camps. And Leejay again, and everyone at NASA for allowing this to happen. And to you out there, all of your wonderful chats and questions and stuff. It's very, very much appreciated. So I will say, be brave, be kind, be brilliant, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thanks again, Caley.
Bye. It was wonderful speaking with you.